Hi there, I'm Andy Malone. I'm a Microsoft MVP and Microsoft certified trainer. I want to take you through what I think is probably one of the best tools in Microsoft 365. Now, when I mean Microsoft 365, of course, I also mean Office 365 as well. And you probably noticed recently that Office 365 and Microsoft 365, they're changing names. So for example, here in the screen, it says Office 365 at the top, but if I go into the Admin Center here, you'll notice that it actually says Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So don't worry, don't panic. It's just that Microsoft are rebranding everything at the moment. So you're no doubt familiar with Office 365 and the different admin centers. And you'll notice that this is the latest, the new admin center. Now, if you've been working on the product for some time, you'll no doubt be familiar with this. This is the traditional admin center, which has now had a nice shiny upgrade. However, one of the things that I want to say is it's often, as an administrator, confusing as to which tool you should use. So for example, I'm going to go into my active users here, and you can see I've got a user called Alan. And you can see that Alan he's got his address in, he's got his license, everything looks good. I can add single users, multiple users, pretty much the same as what I could do before. Now, as I go into Alan's account, one of the things that you'll notice is the screen has changed slightly. You now have more options. However, not everything is here. So there are still some things missing here. Now, the problem is with most UIs in Microsoft, most of these are built on top of a thing called PowerShell. I'm sure you know that PowerShell is a very clever command line and scripting language. But it can be a little bit frustrating, especially when the updates to Azure and Office 365 take place about every 72 hours. So you just get familiar with something and it changes pretty quickly. So which UI should you be using? Now, although the UI here is pretty good and you can do pretty much everything in here, one of the things I would like to introduce you to, if you haven't already discovered it, is the Azure Active Directory Admin Center. Now, the Azure Active Directory Center, for me, is a little bit like Lord of the Rings. It's the one ring to rule them all, because here you can see absolutely everything. And in this short video, what I want to do is just kind of take you through the Azure Active Directory Admin Center. So first up, I'm going to click into users, and you can see this is everything to do with my user accounts. And again, it's exactly the same as the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, except for me, I think it gives you there's a lot more granularity to this particular interface. And it's also much simpler to work with as well. So here you can see I can add pictures. I can go into Alex's identity. I can actually see the object ID for Alex's account here, which could potentially be quite useful. You can also see his job information here, his settings. So right now he's got a mailbox in the United States. Of course, that's important because that's where his data is stored for legal and compliance reasons. Contact information, of course, might come from Exchange. Authentication methods page. So this is how do you want Alex to be authenticated? So traditionally, of course, we authenticate users by usernames and passwords, but that is kind of so 90s now. And the thing is that by having a username and password, it doesn't prove who you are. It just proves to me that you know the username and password. So multi-factor authentication is a much more powerful set of tools, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Now, one thing that you don't get in the Office 365, Microsoft 365 dashboard is this. This is minors and consent. So you can see in here that you can actually categorize Alex as a minor. So if this was a school account, Active Directory at school, there are, for example, GDPR rules. So if you're within the European Union, we have the European Union Data Directive, which stipulates that the storage of personal information for minors and so on. So as I said, you can manage that here. Now, the other thing that you can also do is Alex, by default, is just a regular user at the moment, so he's got no what we call directory roles. And this is called RBAC, Role-Based Admin Control. And RBAC is for administration. So I can go into the administration here. I can say, okay, is there a specific admin role that I want Alan to have? And this is particularly useful because I don't want to give him global admin rights, because global admin rights is a bit like knocking a nail with a sledgehammer. You want something delicate. And also, you only want him to have the permissions that he actually needs to do the specific job. So in that respect, the roles are really good. So for example, if I want him to manage user accounts, reset passwords, create users, but not global admins, I can make him a member of the user admin role. And that's a really, really useful role. So I've gone ahead, I added him into this role now. Now I can also go into the groups. I can make him a member of a particular group. I can add a group membership, of course. And you'll notice there is one difference here between 365 and Azure Active Directory. So I can add the group here. Well, you can see just what groups he's a member of, but the only two groups that you get here are security groups and Office 365 groups. So you can't see things like distribution lists and things like that. You need to view those from either Exchange Online or from within the Microsoft 365 portal. Really clever though is that I can not just see what groups he's a member of, I can also see what applications have been assigned to Alex here, and also what licenses Alex has got. And again, I can assign and remove licenses as I need. If you have deployed mobile device management, if you've got a solution like Intune, then I could obviously see which devices Alex is using and also what resources he's got access to. And I did mention authentication methods, and at the moment, if you're using things like multi-factor authentication, you might want to set up some information on that. So I've set up, do I want to reset the password? Do I want him to require multi-factor authentication? This can be particularly useful because if you found out my username and my password, there's pretty much nothing to stop you going into my account. Like I said, it doesn't prove that it's me. But if you're using a third piece of something, so for example, your fingerprint, your facial recognition, this is proving who you are, not just what you know. So multi-factor authentication is a very powerful security feature. In terms of logging, I can see what sign-ins Alex has done. I can also view the audit log for Alex. And again, I can troubleshoot this as well. So that is my users. So of course you can select multiple users. You can manage multiple users. The other thing that just while we're here, you can also create a guest user from here. And this is actually, there's only a few places where you can actually create a guest user. So a guest user basically sits inside your Azure Active Directory, but he doesn't actually have an account. So he might, for example, be a contractor, a supplier, or something like that. And I can go in here and I can obviously put in their email address and so on. Now, one little gotcha, by the way, of course, I mentioned the user admin role earlier. That's the one role that can't reset guest accounts passwords. Now, obviously, because if I've got my own Gmail address or something like that, of course, I would have to reset that myself. So the guest account access is really useful because you can, although you're not actually have a license for Office 365 or Microsoft 365, you can still participate in many of its features. So things like Teams and SharePoint sites and so on. It's a very powerful feature. On a par with that, another thing that Azure Active Directory does, it allows you to create not just guest users, but also establish organizational relationships. So you can have a B2B, so a business to business relationship with partners, or even a business to consumer relationship as well. And there are a growing series of identity providers. So at the moment we have Google, Amazon, and if you're using federation with either a SAML or a WS Fed provider, you can add that in here as well. Now, if I go into settings, of course, you don't want guest users to have a free reign. So you might want to restrict this, you might want to control this. And again, this is where you can do that. Now, depending on where you are in the world, it's a really good idea to have a good, solid security policy. So what you can do here is you can set up a terms and conditions, and T's and C's, of course, an acceptable usage policy, get any kind of guarantees, and also it's good for security as well. So you can do that. Now, if you've got relationships with other organizations or providers or guest users, it's often a good idea to review them now and again. So do they still need access to your system? Again, very, very useful, very powerful feature there. Okay, so terms of use, again, you can bulk create objects. I'm not going to go through all of these. Like I said, this is just a nice, gentle kind of introduction. So really powerful though is in Azure Active Directory. I can view all my enterprise-wide applications here. And more than that, I can actually add applications. And applications can be anything. Now I'm talking about apps, of course. Apps are the new trendy name for applications. So you can even have apps that you're developing yourself, on-premises applications, and this is clever stuff. You can deploy the Azure AD App Proxy, the application proxy. And this is basically very, very simple. It's an agent that you install on-premises. It connects your on-premises account to your cloud account, and you can then proxy any on-premises based applications and make them available to your users in the portal. Really clever, really smart. Also, you can integrate any application as long as the application supports things like modern authentication, which is, of course, OAuth. But if there are many, many thousands and thousands of apps that you can purchase or you can have from the App Store. And of course, by managing those applications, you can also manage their licensing within the organization and instantly see which users have access to those. If you are using mobile device management, again, everything it's kind of a bit like a bad meal in a restaurant. When you go into some of those restaurants and no matter what you eat, everything goes into each other, so it kind of all tastes the same. It's a little bit like that. So it doesn't really matter which interface you use. The nice thing about Azure AD is that everything seamlessly connects to each other. So the other thing that I was going to show you, so as well as the applications and devices, you have got things like identity governance, and that's really important. So again, there's a whole bunch of reports and packages that you can use. So if you're into compliance and governance, this is a very, very powerful feature. Now, one of the things that's going to be changing is the Azure AD Connect feature. So at the moment, Azure AD Connect is an appliance that you deploy on premises, but it's rumored that this will be changing to an agent-based solution by the end of the year. Now, this is a nice kind of one-stop screen. I can download the Azure AD Connect. So if I have an on-premises Active Directory solution, I can deploy the Azure AD Connect tool on premises. Again, connect both sides of my organization together. And that really has the benefit because I can then port my users. I can move my users or integrate my users from on-premises into the cloud, complete with all their applications, devices, and so on. Custom domain names. So you'll notice that by default you get this tenant. So this M36, this is just a tenant ID. Think of it like the C drive on your computer. The C drive is Azure Active Directory, and the little folders running off that are your tenants. So the tenant is just a container. So, and you get this on Microsoft account, and it's more likely that you're going to want your own domain name, so bobsboats.com or something like that. So again, we have a feature called the managed domain name. So when I add the domain name here, it will generate a proof, and you just basically create that, copy that into a text file in your local DNS, verify it, and that's it. The two are connected, and you can then use that verified domain name. Okay. Mobility and mobile device management and mobile application management. In a future video, I'm actually going to go over that. So come back to that. Password resets. What else have we got? The rest of the stuff is fairly simple. Security is interesting. So you've got all the security features here. If I go into the security area, now you'll notice that some of these things like Azure AD conditional access, identity protection. Now, conditional access is absolutely rocks. Some of these features, though, depending on your license, may or may not be available here. So things like identity protection, for example. Conditional access is amazing. So in the past, you've logged in, you've got access. With conditional access, you can now set up policies which dictate, okay, you can log in on that particular device using this particular app, and you can access this particular OneDrive file only if you're in this particular location at this particular day or time. It's that granular, incredibly powerful, incredibly secure. So definitely take a look at conditional access. And again, this is something that I'm going to come back to in a future video because it's a big topic. It's a big topic. Okay, so obviously you've deployed everything. Monitoring is also really important. Here you can actually view who has signed in to your organization. So how many users have signed in, when did they sign in, where have they signed in from. Again, you can filter that, you can export that, you can choose whether it's in the last 24 hours. We also get very detailed audit logs as well. Again, for security and compliance reasons, you may want to take a look at these. Just one thing about the logs themselves, by the way, they're stored in Azure AD for 90 days. So if you were taking a Microsoft exam, by the way, that might come up as a question. You know what I mean? So yeah, all the logs are here. So as I've mentioned, in 365, there are many different applications and many different places to find out the logs. So one of the nice things you can do is you can integrate your logs into kind of one location, one screen, because it can get a bit confusing with that. Okay. Let's see what else we've got. So usage and insights is another new feature. So this is gives you, insights into how users are interacting with your environment. So how are they logging on? What applications are they using? Who are the top users in the company? Which users use the heaviest amount of data? So all of this, really, really powerful stuff. Okay, so there you have it. A very, very quick overview of Azure Active Directory. And as I say, with so many different interfaces in Office and Microsoft 365, it can be confusing as to which one I want to use. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little video, and thank you so much for watching. Okay, I'm Andy Malone. See you next time.